And so here's a question. Here's
Sure.
a background question.
Yeah.
I think you may have made a comment months and months ago that I want to dive into.
Sure.
I think you had mentioned you started playing violin a few years ago
Oh,
when
yeah.
you were learning music at the
yeah.
start.
Yeah.
You know, what was that like?
Well, and let me take it a step back
Sure.
from that time. I grew up, as far as my memories go, from the early 60s. But even prior to the early 60s, I always had this inclination and ear for music. Don't know why, but it was that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so the music back in those days is what really influenced me. I was listening to Fats Domino, Elvis, and many, many others. Jan and Dean. It was amazing.
Look them up. All right.
So I grew up in this area of soul music and surf music and things. It was just different. And I was so in tune with it, not even playing an instrument or anything. I was even thinking this morning, my gosh, you know what? When I was maybe 8 years old, I remember having building a crystal radio. I don't know if you're familiar with the crystal radios or not. It was something unlike today, if technology has grown so far. But I had this little box that I would wind a wire around a magnet, and there's a crystal rock attached to it, and it would receive radio waves. And for an antenna, I ran it to a clothesline, and from the clothesline came into my bedroom into this little box, and I had little tiny headphones or an earplug you plugged it into, and I would listen to nighttime because the AM radios, at least then, I don't know how it is, they would broadcast in higher wattage. So I would listen to WBZ, WLS. These are Boston and Chicago stations.
Nice.
I lived in Columbus, Ohio. And I'd pick up these stations from the South and so forth, and especially at nighttime because it was higher wattage. And I would start tuning in and listening to that music at an early age, just instinctively. And then what really crossed me over to wanting to play, well, the violin lessons was not by choice. It was by my dad had a violin from his dad. And it's like, there you are, here, you're going to learn to play violin. And I started to play that, and it was okay. It wasn't my first choice, and I went to a Catholic school and had this old Catholic nun that I could not please no matter what.
Oh,
I was
no.
like first or second grade. She was really old, and she would wrap my hands, hit them hard with whatever she hit them with, and I learned to hate playing, especially for her, but I tried real hard. But I did get some basic things of timing, reading music, at least for the violin and so on.
So she kind of turned you off from the violin.
Yeah.
What was it like? You'd make errors while learning, and she'd
Yes, yeah,
really,
yeah.
That's a part of the
Well,
process.
she was pretty old, so like she was old school at the
Right.
time. But what really turned me was when I heard the Beatles.
Okay.
And you'll hear this probably from every musician in my generations. There was something about the Beatles that was so different to the prior things I was listening to, not only musically, vocally, and the looks, everything about it, and the girls screaming. It was everything. And
Beatlemania.
it was Beatlemania. But for a lot of musicians, like Joe Walsh is one, it was the
Yeah.
Beatles that got it, and many, many others, and the Stones roughly at the same time. So I wanted to learn to play guitar. Didn't know how. I had no clue what to do. But what I did remember was at my grandmother's house on my dad's side of the family, the one who had the violin that I had to play, had some kind of an old guitar from Mexico sitting in a room. And every time I go to her house, I pick this thing up. Just like I didn't know what to do with it, but I would just pluck at it. And I just pluck, and it made no sense, but I felt like I was a Beatle.
Yeah.
So from there, I had a cousin who had this old junk acoustic guitar. It was spray painted gold. So somehow I acquired that from my cousin, and I would just bang away at this thing, not knowing what to do with it. And eventually I saw my Aunt Sharon from Lancaster, Ohio, and this is what took me to the levels where I wanted to go. She sang, played guitar in a country band in Lancaster, and I got to see her play. It's like she was my inspiration from that day forward to learn to play and actually at that time sing. And that was my real inspiration.
Wow.
But the key to it was like I was just saying, I still do. I sit down with other people, doesn't matter who it is to me, and just do little jam sessions, learning. And that's how I learned to play, was just jamming from other kids who learned a chord or two, and I learned from them, and so on and so on. And it just grew from there.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, are those the two instruments that you've learned, or have you learned more than?
Over the course of time, I learned other instruments. Back in the late 80s, I got in a band with doing, at that time it was kind of ahead of its time. There wasn't many people doing this. There were some. It was Christian rock music. So we were writing all original music. Randy Stout was the chief writer. He's a really good musician, still writes and records, and he has stuff on Spotify, Reverberation, and other places, and so forth. And so when I was doing my course with these people, I was playing rhythm guitar, some lead guitar. I was doing keyboards.
Nice.
So I taught myself keyboards. I was never proficient at it, but I played well enough to make a song sound good. And my goal wasn't to be extremely proficient, but just, something to add to a song. And I was self-taught with that. And then, of course, I was self-taught playing mandolin as well. And I was using that at times in certain settings. So it was primarily with the string instruments. Yeah, but the keyboards was fun for me. I enjoyed doing that. Yeah.
Would you ever do it again?
Possibly. I'd have to sit. It's like riding a bike. You might not have ridden it for quite a while, but you can get back in. But not to the point to where I would want to do long solos or anything like that. But just to make a song sound good with the different effects that you can have on keyboards and so forth.
All right.
But yeah, just it was enhancing music and songs. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great.